You know, every single time you click Buy Now, you're kicking off this invisible, incredibly complicated dance that happens all over the globe. But the real heart of that system, the place where all that crazy complexity gets sorted out, it isn't some server farm. It's a building. A really, really big building. So let's dig in and take a closer look at the blueprint for how this all works.
Take a look at this, a giant Amazon distribution center. This is a perfect example. It's so easy for us to think of warehouses as just, big, simple boxes for storage. But they're not. Not at all. They are the highly tuned brains of the entire logistics network, these massive engines that power our modern economy. And that brings us to this central mystery we're going to unpack. Why is it that a brand new, state-of-the-art warehouse in the US looks almost nothing like one in Singapore or China or Germany? The answer, it turns out, reveals something really profound about how our world is put together.
To solve this mystery, we first have to understand the unseen engine that's behind the scenes, driving every single one of these design decisions. This one idea right here is the absolute key. See, every warehouse on the entire planet is a unique solution to a very specific economic puzzle. It's never about which design is the best overall. It's all about which one is best for a particular place at a particular time.
And that puzzle, well, it's always a delicate balancing act, a kind of juggle between a few key economic levers, and mastering them is the name of the game.
First up, we've got space, and this is pretty simple. How much does the ground underneath the building actually cost? Is land everywhere and super cheap, or is it scarce and incredibly expensive? This one factor alone changes everything. Second, there's labor. What's the going rate for a human worker for an hour? Are there plenty of people available to hire, or are they hard to find? And of course, how flexible are the local labor laws? And third, you've got capital. Now this is basically the cost of all the stuff, the forklifts, the conveyor belts, the sophisticated robots, and even the simple steel racks that hold all the products. And here's where it all comes together. Success is all about the trade-offs. You're constantly balancing the cost of space against the cost of labor and the cost of labor against the cost of capital. Every single warehouse you see is just a physical manifestation of those choices. All right, so let's see how these trade-offs actually play out in the real world. We'll start with that first lever, space, because this one leads to a fundamental design choice. Do you build out or do you build up? Just look at this comparison. On the left, that's your typical American warehouse. It's built on cheap, rural land, so it just spreads out. It's massive, but it's flat. Then, on the right, you've got a distribution center in Singapore, where land is astronomically expensive. They have absolutely no choice but to go vertical.
Now, this creates a fascinating engineering problem. You can't just use elevators, right? They're way too slow. You'd have insane bottlenecks. So what do? How on earth do you get a full-size truck up to what is basically the 7th story of a building?
You do this. This is honestly one of the most clever solutions in all of logistics. You build a spiral highway inside the building. This lets a full 45-foot trailer drive right up to a docking bay on any floor. It's brilliant. It effectively makes every single floor a ground floor. But remember what we said, it's all about trade-offs. The cost for this ingenious solution is space itself. That spiral ramp consumes about 30% of the facility's total footprint. So yeah, you solved the access problem, but you had to sacrifice a huge chunk of your potential storage area just to do it. Okay, so that was space. Now let's look at those other two levers. That constant tug of war between the cost of people and the cost of machines. This might be the most powerful comparison of them all. On the last, cases of beer in a US warehouse, all neatly stacked on pallets, just waiting to be moved by a forklift. Then on the right, you see the same kind of product in a Chinese warehouse, being stacked entirely by hand, case by individual case.
The logic here is crystal clear. In the US, labor is expensive, and capital, things like a forklift, is relatively cheap. So you spend money on the machine to save money on labor. Simple. In China, the whole equation is flipped. Labor is incredibly cheap, and that forklift represents a major capital expense. So it is completely economically rational to just have teams of people stack everything by hand.
And get this, it's not unusual to find a warehouse in China that's 250,000 square feet, that's the size of 4.5 football fields, with just one single forklift truck. That one detail tells you everything you need to know about the economics at play.
Then you've got Europe, especially places like Germany.
Here, labor isn't just expensive, it's also governed by really strict regulations, which makes it inflexible. So that pushes designers to optimize for capital, which leads to these facilities with just incredible levels of automation, like this crazy high-rise robotic storage system. They invest a ton of money in machines to minimize their reliance on a workforce that's both expensive and inflexible.
So, we've seen how space, labor, and capital completely shape these buildings differently all over the globe. And when you put it all together, a really clear pattern emerges. One that starts to tell us about what the warehouse of tomorrow might look like.
When it comes right down to it, a warehouse is like the economic DNA of a region. In general, you can see that North America optimizes for cheap space, East Asia optimizes for cheap labor, and Europe optimizes for capital to overcome its expensive labor. Each design is a perfect, logical response to its own local economic conditions.
And this all leads us to a final, pretty provocative thought. For decades, this global economic balance has held more or less firm. But we are entering an age where the cost of capital, of smart automation and robotics, is just plummeting. So what happens to this entire global system when the math changes and the machine becomes the cheapest option for everyone? Well, that is the puzzle for tomorrow.